Caught my son's friend doing this in our hotel room, while my son watched. True confession. I didn't plan for any of this. Not the trip, not the room, and definitely not what I saw that night. It was just supposed to be a weekend bowling tournament. Instead, I caught something I shouldn't have, something I can't unsee. And when my son looked at me afterward, quiet, confused, I knew that whatever innocence we had left had just unraveled. My name is Elise Carter. I'm 47, a night shift nurse, and a single mom. Life hasn't exactly been soft with me. My ex-husband walked out 5 years ago. Said he needed something more. What he really meant was someone younger. I've been raising Tyler on my own ever since. My sweet, sharp, complicated 17-year-old boy. He's quiet these days, not moody, just distant, like he's living more in his head than in the world. But he loves bowling. That's the one place he comes alive. So when his team qualified for regionals 2 towns over, I didn't hesitate. I booked a cheap hotel and told work I'd find someone to cover. Tyler's best friend Drew came too. He's 20, polite, calm, taller than I remembered. I used to drive them both to practice when they were in middle school. But now he walks and talks like a man. It caught me off guard. How different he looked. I told myself it was nothing. Just age. We arrived Friday evening. The hotel wasn't fancy, basic lobby. Carpet that had seen better decades, but it had 2 queen beds and a working heater. That's all I cared about. The boys unpacked quickly. I offered to grab dinner. Drew smiled, said thank you, eyes meeting mine for just a second too long. It meant nothing. I told myself that again. We were just here for the tournament. 3 days, 2 nights, and a chance for Tyler to shine. I didn't know it'd be the weekend that changed everything. I used to believe in marriage. I really did. I believed in long nights curled up on the couch. In soft kisses before work. In grocery runs that turned into little adventures. But somewhere between year 7 and year 10, my husband stopped seeing me. Not stopped loving me, stopped seeing me. Like I became part of the furniture. Useful, predictable, invisible. The divorce wasn't ugly, just cold, empty. He moved in with someone else before our papers were finalized. I didn't fight. I didn't cry much either. I just shut down. My job picked up the slack. Working nights meant I didn't have time to think. Time to feel. Now, 5 years later, I live in routines. I rotate between hospital halls and my quiet house. My world is charts, meds, 3 a.m. coffees, and the sound of beeping monitors. It's oddly comforting, this predictable numbness. Like I'm floating just beneath the surface of life. Never too deep to drown. Never high enough to breathe. And Tyler, he's all I've got. I love him more than anything. But even with him, I sometimes feel like a shadow on the edge of his life. He's 17. He's growing away from me. That's normal, I know, but still, it aches. A quiet kind of ache that sits in your chest and hums through your bones. So when this bowling trip came up, I thought, maybe this is my chance. A little change, a little air, just us, together again, and for the first time in months, I felt something almost like anticipation. Not joy, but close, like maybe I'd been asleep for a long time and the world was knocking. Softly, just outside the door. We'd just finished dinner at a local diner. Tyler was glued to his phone, half listening as I tried to ask about school. Drew, sitting across from me, answered in his place, polite, engaged, almost warm. He asked how work was. Said he remembered me being the cool mom back in 8th grade. I laughed, surprised he remembered anything about me. Most boys his age don't even look up when you speak. But Drew did, and when he looked, he didn't just glance, he saw. Later that night, back at the hotel, the boys stayed up to play cards. I was tired. I left them in the lobby and headed upstairs to shower. I didn't mean to fall asleep in just a towel, stretched out across one side of the bed. But I did. It wasn't until I heard the door open and Tyler's voice mutter, "She's out cold," that I realized they were back. I stayed still, half asleep, hoping they wouldn't notice. Drew walked past my side of the bed toward his. He smelled like aftershave and something warm. Masculine. My pulse picked up unexpectedly. I kept my eyes closed, heart fluttering for reasons I didn't quite understand. I told myself it was just the long day. Just the wine from dinner. Just exhaustion. But the next morning, during breakfast, it happened again. Drew reached across the table for the butter. And his fingers brushed mine. It was so minor, so quick. It shouldn't have meant anything. But I pulled my hand back too fast. Like I'd been caught in something wrong. He noticed. His mouth curled into a small, knowing smile, brief, subtle, but it landed hard. Tyler didn't notice. He was busy pouring syrup over pancakes, distracted by his phone. And me? I stared at my coffee and wondered why my cheeks were burning. Why my stomach felt tight. Why that single brush of fingers had followed me into my dreams the night before. I hadn't been touched in years. And now, with just one glance, one smile, I felt something shift. Something small, but real. That night, I couldn't sleep. The boys had gone out for a late-night practice at the nearby alley. I stayed behind, told them I was too tired, which was partly true, but really, I needed space. My mind had been spinning ever since breakfast. That accidental touch, the look he gave me, it wasn't flirtatious exactly, but it wasn't neutral either. It lingered. I took a long shower, hoping to shake it off. The steam fogged the mirror, but nothing could clear the heat that had settled just beneath my skin. I stood there wrapped in a towel, staring at my reflection, wondering when I'd last looked at myself like a woman and not just a caretaker. A nurse, a mother. They returned just after 11. Tyler looked tired and dropped straight into bed. Drew nodded at me as he walked past, shirt slightly damp from the night air. Hair tousled. He didn't say anything, just smiled. That same small, unbothered smile. I lay in bed with the lights off, eyes wide open, watching shadows flicker from the muted TV. I could hear the boys breathing. Tyler's rhythm was steady. Drew's was slower, deeper. The room felt too warm, too close. I turned over, then back again. My skin tingled, like it remembered that brief contact from earlier and was asking for more. I told myself it was just hormones. Loneliness, the kind of moment that passes. But then I heard movement. The rustle of sheets, a soft exhale. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see the outline of Drew. Still beneath the covers, shifting slightly. His arm moved, so did the blanket. My breath caught. I looked away, heart pounding. This was none of my business. I wasn't supposed to see. And yet, my eyes drifted back. I told myself not to stare. But I did. And the worst part wasn't that he was doing it. The worst part was that I didn't look away. The next morning, I couldn't look at him. I tried. I really did. I told myself it was all in my head. That I'd imagined more than what was there. That I was just tired. But when I saw Drew come out of the bathroom, hair damp, shirt clinging slightly to his chest, I felt that same flutter in my stomach. And I hated it. At breakfast, I kept my eyes on my plate. Tyler talked about the bracket. How their team had made it to the second round. I nodded, smiled when appropriate, but my mind was somewhere else, stuck between guilt and curiosity. Drew sat across from me, quiet, focused on his eggs. At one point, he looked up. Our eyes met, just for a second, but that second was long enough to feel something unspoken pass between us. I excused myself early and went back to the room, pretending I'd forgotten my phone. I just needed air, space, silence. I stood by the window, watching traffic pass on the main road, wondering what the hell was wrong with me. He's a boy, I told myself. Barely 20, he's your son's best friend. But he wasn't just a boy. Not anymore. Not with the way he carried himself. Not with the way he looked at me like he knew I'd seen him last night, and didn't run. And then came the worst part of all, the question I didn't want to answer. What if I didn't want to run? I hated myself for thinking it. For the way it made my heart race. For the heat that rose up my neck just imagining what could have happened if I'd said something. Done something. I hadn't crossed any lines. But emotionally? I was already standing at the edge. And part of me wasn't sure I wanted to step back. That night, everything felt too quiet. We'd gotten back late from dinner with the team. Tyler was exhausted and fell asleep almost instantly. I turned the TV on low, just enough to keep my thoughts from spiraling. I sat at the edge of the bed, scrolling through nothing on my phone, pretending not to notice Drew shifting beneath the covers across the room. I glanced over, meaning only to check if he was asleep. He wasn't. He was lying on his side, facing me, eyes open, watching. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The air between us felt thick, humid with the weight of what hadn't been said. I looked away, my chest tightening. I should have turned off the light, pulled the covers over my head, and buried myself in sleep. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something in that silence dared me to stay in it. I shifted under the covers, facing him, my eyes adjusted to the soft glow of the TV, just enough to see the rise and fall of his chest. He didn't move, but I could feel him there, awake, aware, waiting. I whispered, "You're not sleeping." He shook his head once. Slow. I should have stopped there. That was my moment, the line. Instead, I asked, "Are you okay?" He didn't answer at first. Then, with a voice barely above a breath, he said, "Are you?" The question stunned me, not because it was inappropriate, but because it was too honest. And somehow, it unraveled something inside me. All the years of being unseen, untouched, unspoken to, they poured into that 1 second. I didn't answer either, I just stared. And then, he reached for his water bottle on the nightstand. A small move, innocent, maybe, but when his arm stretched, the blanket slipped low on his waist. My eyes followed before I could stop them. And he saw. He saw me looking. He didn't cover up. He didn't smirk. He just held my gaze, calm, steady, like he was letting me decide what happened next. I swallowed hard, pulse thudding in my ears. I turned over, pulled the blanket to my chin, and lay there, stiff, burning, ashamed, but not because of what I saw. Because of how much I wanted to keep looking. The next morning, Tyler barely looked at me. At first, I thought he was just tired. Tournament nerves, maybe, but there was something different in his silence, something sharp. He avoided eye contact, answered with clipped words, and kept his distance, even in the elevator. I brushed it off, told myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew. I felt it in the way he didn't wait for me in the lobby. In the way he walked ahead with Drew like I wasn't even there. It wasn't until that evening, when I went back to the room alone, that the weight of it really hit me. Tyler came in later, said he needed to grab his hoodie. He barely acknowledged me. I asked him if everything was okay. He nodded too quickly, then turned, hoodie in hand, and paused at the door. "I saw you," he said. My stomach dropped. I asked, "Saw me what?" He didn't answer right away, just stared at the carpet like he was deciding whether to say it again. "Last night," he finally muttered, "you were looking at him. Like, not normal." I opened my mouth to respond, but there was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like a lie. "I'm not stupid, Mom," he added, still not meeting my eyes. "I don't know what's going on. And I don't want to know. But it's messed up." And then he left. The door clicked behind him like a final sentence I didn't get to finish. I stood in the quiet for a long time, barely breathing. The worst part wasn't the shame. It was the confirmation that it hadn't all been in my head. That someone else had seen the shift in me. Someone who mattered more than anyone. I hadn't done anything. No lines crossed. No words spoken. But that didn't matter, did it? He saw my truth before I did. And just like that, whatever space was left between mother and son, snapped. We didn't speak much on the drive home. Tyler sat in the back seat, headphones in, staring out the window like the trees held better conversation than I ever could. I didn't push him. What could I even say? "I'm sorry for the way I looked at your best friend." There was no apology that would make sense. Nothing that would undo the crack I'd let form. Drew texted once, A polite thank you for the ride. And said he'd see us around. I didn't respond. Back home, things didn't go back to normal because normal had shifted. Tyler stopped leaving his bedroom door open. He spent more time at his dad's. He stopped asking me to come to his games. I told myself he was just growing up. But the truth? He'd lost something. Trust, maybe, or the illusion that his mother was untouchable. I felt it every time he called me, Mom, without warmth. Every time he walked past without looking me in the eye. And me? I kept replaying that night like a broken film reel. Not just what I saw, but how I reacted, the heat in my chest, the ache in my stomach, the part of me that leaned in, not physically, but emotionally, that wanted something. Then, one afternoon while folding laundry, I found it. A small black GoPro in Tyler's duffel bag. I froze. I hadn't seen Drew using it, hadn't heard it turn on, but suddenly, I couldn't breathe. What if? I turned it over in my hand, staring at the blinking red light that might have been recording. I didn't plug it in. I didn't check the footage. I couldn't, because I wasn't sure what would be worse, finding out nothing was there, or that something was. That night, I put it back where I found it. And sat alone in the dark. Knowing the worst part wasn't what I'd done. It was what I'd let myself feel. I never touched him. I didn't say anything I couldn't take back. I didn't cross the line, not physically. But emotionally? I walked right up to the edge and stared into it. And the scariest part? I didn't feel afraid. I felt seen. Drew never brought it up. Tyler never asked again. Life moved on, as it always does. But something in our home shifted, an invisible silence that settled between us like fog. Heavy, unspoken, real. Sometimes, I wonder if it would have been easier if I'd done something truly terrible. At least then I'd have a name for what I'm carrying. But when your sins live in your thoughts, when they bloom in a glance, a breath, a pause too long, you don't get to confess them. You just carry them, alone. I still see Drew, sometimes, grocery stores, gas stations. He nods politely. I nod back. Nothing more. But every time, my skin remembers. And Tyler? He's still distant, still careful, like something between us cracked and never quite healed. Maybe it never will. So here I am, telling strangers on the internet what I can't say out loud, hoping someone else has felt something like this. Not the act, but the ache, the shame of wanting to be wanted, the guilt of being human. And if you were me, if you had felt that same heat rise in your chest, that same breath catch in your throat, would you have looked away? Or would you have kept watching?